When someone mentions Tibet, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Mountains? Yaks? The country's tumultuous relationship with China? Or perhaps you immediately think of bald Buddhist monks in orange and red robes? The Tibetan Plateau is often called the roof of the world, and it is roughly 50% larger than Alaska. So how did this remote country become synonymous with monks? Join us as we take a look at the history of Buddhism in Tibet and why the monks who live there have become world famous. Buddhism originated in India at some point between the late 6th and early 4th century BCE. Still, it didn't reach Tibet until around the 7th century BCE. Before the arrival of Buddhism, the main religion was Bon, which is an indigenous religion in Tibet. Bon, also referred to as Bonism or Yongdrung Bon, had a marked effect on Buddhism in the region, and many theorize that this religion influenced the rest of what is now known as Tibetan Buddhism. Bon is thought to have originated between 2000 and 1000 BCE, with its modern iteration developing around the 9th and 10th centuries CE. After Buddhism reached the area, both religions influenced each other. So, Bon before the 8th century is often referred to as the unadulterated phase of the religion. It is believed to be one of the oldest religions in the country and is animistic, focusing on the worship of nature. Practitioners of Bon give its origins as the Zhangzhung region, near Mount Kailash in the Himalayas. According to Bon doctrine, the religion was founded by Trungpa Shenrab Miwosh. However, there were older local religions, also called Bon, that were more shamanistic, involving ritual animal sacrifices to natural deities. Trungpa Shenrab Miwosh is said to have been of royal birth but renounced his former life and embarked on a path to enlightenment. It is said that he abolished the practice of animal sacrifices and replaced it with symbolic rituals that involved making prayer cakes, called tormas, in the shapes of animals. He taught his followers that killing animals would create negative karma. In the 8th and 9th centuries, a struggle between these two religions took place, with the ruling house of Tibet as proponents of Buddhism and the powerful noble families siding with Bon. This power struggle saw Bon develop into a more systemized religion with sacred literature and a specific doctrine. By the beginning of the 9th century, the prevalence of Bon was in decline, although it made a lasting mark on Buddhism in the region and remains a living religion today. Buddhism is traditionally thought to have been brought to Tibet by Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo in the 7th century under the influence of his wives, Princess Prakuti of Nepal and Princess Wencheng of China's Tang dynasty. Both princesses brought statues of the Buddha with them as part of their dowries. Prakuti brought the statue of Jowo Mekyodoji, a representation of the Buddha at 8 years old, and the Jokhang Temple was built to house the statue, which faces west to Nepal. Wencheng brought with her another statue, Jowo Shakyamuni, and the Ramosh Temple, which faces China to the east, was built to house this statue. Buddhism in Tibet was revitalized in the 8th century when the Tibetan king Trisong Detsen invited two Buddhist masters, Shantarakshita and Padmasambhava, to come to Tibet and translate some important Buddhist texts into Tibetan. Some cite the first true Buddhist monastery as Samya Monastery, built in the area of the Yarlung Zambo River Valley in Sedong country of Loka Prefecture. It was thought to have been built on the orders of King Trisong Detsen between 775 and 779. According to an ancient legend, construction of the temples was hindered as parts of the building began collapsing for no reason, leaving the monastery uncompleted. The builders believed this was due to a demon who was hindering construction. When an Indian sage, Padmasambhava, visited the construction site, he found the demon. He subdued it with the performance of the Vajraki Leya dance and used yarn to create an endless knot, after which the monastery was completed. During this time, and until the late 9th century, Tibet was a unified power known as the Tibetan Empire. It ruled a vast territory that went beyond the Tibetan Plateau. Its rapid decline is still the source of debate, with religious and political turmoil being some of the primary causes. Still, many historians believe that a fluctuating climate, followed by a period of extended drought, caused the empire to fragment and collapse. However, according to traditional Tibetan history, the empire collapsed when the last Tibetan ruler, King Langdharma, began persecuting Buddhists and ordering the monasteries to be closed. According to the legend, one monk, Lalung Peljidorje, assassinated the emperor to prevent Buddhism from being wiped out. The empire fell into infighting, and Tibet descended into chaos. However, this story is questioned by modern scholars who suggest that Langdharma didn't really persecute Buddhism and was probably a practicing Buddhist himself. After Lingdharma died, his sons vied for the throne. The monastic community came to an end. A handful of monks managed to continue the Mulasarvastivada line of monk ordination, which is followed by all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. During the late 10th century, Tibetan Buddhism was again revived when King Sempo Kori abdicated his throne to become a monk. Taking the name Dal Lama Yesheo, he sent a group of 21 men to Kashmir in 971 to study Buddhism. In 1042, an Indian spiritual teacher helped to rekindle Tibetan interest in Buddhism, and its influence spread throughout every aspect of life in the region. Tibetan Buddhism has several distinct features that some people argue came from the previous Bon religion. These include the status of the Lama, or teacher, a preoccupation with the relationship between life and death, an emphasis on rituals and initiations, rich visual symbolism, and a focus on mantras and meditation. Supernatural beings are also prominent, with bodhisattvas being portrayed as both benevolent and wrathful. Some lamas rose to prominence as reincarnation of their predecessors. These reincarnated lamas are thought to be the highest level of spiritual development and are called Spruku lamas. The Tibetan people fully embraced Buddhism, and it became an intrinsic part of their culture, art, and political sphere. Monasteries became the center of many Tibetan communities. The monasteries were more than just a place of worship. They were an essential part of the community, granting loans, financing trade, and offering a safety net in times of economic crises. During the 11th century, Buddhism became further interwoven with the power structure of the country, with local lords supporting sects and the lamas of the sects coming from noble families. In the 13th century, the Tibetans came into military contact with the Mongols, who began attacking monasteries around 1240. The Mongols formed a political and religious relationship with Tibet when, in 1247, Sakya Pandita, the leader of the Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism, was given symbolic temporal power over Tibet by the grandson of Genghis Khan. The same year, Sakya Pandita's nephew, Phagpa, accompanied his uncle on a visit to Mongolia. The relationship was solidified further when Kublai Khan appointed Phagpa, who was now the Lama, as his advisor. The dominance of the Mongols and the Sakya order came to an end in 1368, when the Chinese Ming dynasty evicted the Mongols, after which Tibet enjoyed over 100 years of independence. During this time, another monastic school of Buddhism, the Phagma Drpa line, governed Tibet. During this time, there was a rise in the number of Buddhist scholars, preachers, mystics, hermits, monastic administrators, and warriors. Buddhism bloomed. Temple walls were decorated with frescoes, carvings, and other decorations, and painted wooden pillars were adorned with silk and painted banners called tankas. As Tibet grew in power and influence, new political religious sects were formed, including the Gelugpa. Its founder, Tsongkhapa, established his own monastery in 1409 and devoted his life to restoring strict monastic discipline. After his death, his followers built the new sect of Gelugpa, or Yellow Hat sect, centering around his teaching. This sect gave birth to the highest lineage of Spruku lamas, the Dalai Lama. The first in this line was Gedun Drupa, who was born in 1391. At the age of 14, he took his novice vows and went on to study under Tsongkhapa. He became a renowned Buddhist scholar, writing more than 8 books on his insights into Buddhist teachings and philosophy. He died while meditating in 1474, and the following year, Gedun Gyatso was born. As soon as Gyatso started to talk, he told his parents that his name was Pema Dorji, which was the birth name of the first Dalai Lama. Thus, the line of the Dalai Lama began. The Gelugpa revived the patron-priest relationship with the Mongols in 1578, when they allied with the Tumed Mongol leader. In 1589, the alliance was solidified when the 4th Dalai Lama was born into the Tumed royal family. When the Tumed Mongols' authority declined in Mongolia, the Koshit Mongols supported the Gelugpa. In 1640, they invaded Tibet and defeated the current Song king, who was allied with the Karmapa, or Red Hat sect. In 1642, the leader of the Koshit tribe, Gu Shikan, made the Dalai Lama the ruler of Tibet, consolidating the religious and temporal power of the Gelugpa and forever cementing Tibet's link to monastic life. Because the Mongols respected the Dalai Lama, the Qing dynasty of China understood that good relations with Tibet were important. As the Qing government lent more support to the Dalai Lama's political power, Mongolian control in the region waned. What followed was a period of political instability, after which followed a cultural migration from China into Tibet, especially amongst the upper classes. Under Manchu influence, Tibet became a closed country in 1792, ending diplomatic visits from British India and excluding Christian missionaries. The British had hoped that Tibet would become a trade route to China. When no diplomatic inroads had been made by 1903, the British attacked Tibet, causing the Dalai Lama to flee to China. In 1904, Tibet signed the Anglo-Tibetan Treaty that granted trade concessions to Britain. Then, in 1906, the British signed a treaty with China that recognized Chinese sovereignty over Tibet, resulting in the Chinese taking control of Tibet by force and the Dalai Lama fleeing to India in 1910. Although the Tibetans were able to expel the Chinese after the start of the Chinese Revolution, by 1950 the Chinese were ready to invade again. This time, the new communist regime decided they needed to liberate Tibet and quickly overwhelm the Tibetan troops. Although the 14th Dalai Lama appealed to the United Nations, his plea was denied, and Tibet was unable to get any support from India or Britain. During the Chinese occupation of Tibet, Tibetan Buddhism came to the attention of the West when refugees began to establish Buddhist centers in other parts of the world. The intrinsic link of Buddhist monks to the culture and political structure of Tibet gave the world a lasting impression of the country, which was one that heavily involved monks. Today, Tibet's Buddhist ministries are a key part of its cultural identity. They still hold great religious significance and political importance under Chinese occupation. As hotbeds of political activity and a symbol of Tibetan resistance, Chinese authorities have often viewed them as a threat to Chinese rule. In an effort to break the influence of the monasteries, many of them were destroyed in the early 1960s, and today most of those that remain are under surveillance. Perhaps ironically, by invading Tibet, China solidified Tibetan identity in the West, establishing the prevalence of Tibetan Buddhism and promoting the ideals and image of Tibetan monks. When Tibetan refugees began to flee Tibet for the West, the plight and history of the Tibetan monks caught the imagination of Westerners. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the history of Tibet, check out our book, History of Tibet, a captivating guide to ancient kingdoms, the Tibetan Empire, Mongol invasions, Buddhism, Chinese rule, and modern times. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.